60 years ago, Marilyn Monroe passed away, and the consensus was that she took her own life. Even to this day, there are still suspicions surrounding her death due to Monroe's contacts with J.F.K and R.F.K and how they may have been exploited by the Mafia, the Soviet Union, and the F.B.I. Based on all the research I have done on Marilyn Monroe over the years, I have always been suspicious about the cause of her death. I am not convinced that she took her own life. If it wasn't murder, then it was an accident. Let's take a look at the final hours of Marilyn Monroe's life.
Thank you, Avaya, for sponsoring this post. So I love wearing super cute vintage inspired shoes, but obviously I like comfortable shoes too. I'm not one to be able to walk in super high heels or stand for long periods of time in high heels. And I love Avaya because they maximize comfort without compromising the elegant look of high heels. And Maria, the co-founder of Avaya, says she spent her whole career in shoes in the past 20 years, and she had an obsession with high heels, and she wanted to make something that was built for comfort. And she says Avaya has the most comfortable shoes on the market. So Avaya sent me 3 pairs of shoes. So the first one is a pointed toe bow flat, and this one is called Area. And I love the pink color, especially for spring. And these Area holiday flats are designed with a sleek pointed toe silhouette and a comfortable flat heel. These trendy flats feature an eco-friendly knit upper and stylish seasonal colors with interchangeable knit bows. And they have a breathable antimicrobial fabric. They're machine washable, and they're made from 6 plastic bottles, and they have a deodorizing removable insole, anti-slip rubber outsoles. And a lot of Avaya shoes are machine washable, especially the flats, and the high heels you can hand wash them. And the next one I got is Julie, and this is a round toe chunky heel. And the Julie heel features a chic retro-inspired rounded cap toe design with a 45mm thick heel for better stability when walking. A soft natural cushion adds antibacterial and deodorizing effects, making these stylish women's heels perfect for any occasion from commuting to social events and more. And the next one I got are mules, and these ones are Erica. They're round toe fluffy pattern mules, and I wanted something fun like these that I could just slip on going to the grocery store, running errands, just something quick and easy as an alternative to ballet flats. And again, they're made with eco fluffy yarn and plastic bottles and the same antimicrobial and breathable fabric. And all the shoes are made with V-foam 4-foot midsoles made from 100% recyclable premium TPE, same as a yoga mat, delivers all-day comfort with additional energy return with each step. Its ultra lightweight composition paired with its bounciness gives you the feeling that you're walking on clouds. Avaya uses low temperature hot melt adhesive, which is the best alternative to traditional. It's 100% green, environmentally friendly, biodegradable, and extremely flexible. It's shaped to ensure the softness and elasticity in the toe box. And the next feature, the toe box, made of a double-sided lycra and hot melted adhesive. Lycra improves the elasticity and extendability of the fabric, so the toe boxes are more flexible, skin-friendly, and breathable, not squeezing your toes. And I didn't even notice that in the pink pointed flats. Like when I put my foot in there, I really thought my toes would get really squished in there, but I felt like there was like a lot of room for movement and it wasn't really being squished. And the heel counter is made of microfiber and a hot melted adhesive. Microfiber is a non-woven fabric with a 3-dimensional structure network. It has good air permeability, abrasion resistance, and age resistance. At the same time, its skin-friendly texture will take good care of your ankles. So use the code JANE18 to get 18% off, and I'll link all of the ones that I chose below. So make sure you check it out, and thanks Avaya for sponsoring this post. Now let's jump right in and talk about Marilyn Monroe's final hours.
When Marilyn Monroe passed away 60 years ago, people all over the world were utterly shocked and curious to how such a beautiful actress who was only 36 years old had died so tragically. Even though the coroner stated that Marilyn Monroe took her own life, many questions still go unanswered. Was Marilyn Monroe assassinated? Many conspiracy theories have grown in popularity over the years. George Cukor, who directed Monroe in 2 of her films, including her final unfinished one, described her death as a horrible business. Her death was her most humiliating rejection. Money and power took over, and she was ultimately too innocent. I think deep down, Marilyn Monroe wanted to find true love and have a family, but she was ultimately manipulated and fell in love with the wrong men. In the final week of her life, Marilyn spent a lot of time on the phone. She was planning a whirlwind of activities, including organizing future projects and making plans to fly to New York for talks of a new musical. Monroe appeared to be in high spirits to most people she chatted with. That's why I find it so shocking of the possibility that she took her own life. There were, however, hints of a different atmosphere. Monroe consulted with a California psychic, Kenny Kingston, over the months leading up to her death. Kenny said that she talked in a moody manner regarding her love life. Marilyn called Hollywood gynecologist Dr. Leon Cron out of the blue to see if he was still mad at her. Dr. Leon had previously advised Marilyn to stay away from drugs and alcohol when she was pregnant and had a miscarriage as a result. But why was she phoning at this particular time? The doctor was completely unaware of Marilyn's claims that one of the Kennedy brothers had impregnated her weeks before. Marilyn claimed that she had lost a baby. It was not clear if she had a miscarriage or an illegal abortion, according to various sources. Earlier in the week before she died, Marilyn called her longtime friend, estate agent Arthur James, who was one of the people she had notified about the baby. "What can I do about the he?" Marilyn required. As far as James knew, he was code for President John F. Kennedy. She went on to say Robert F. Kennedy shut her off in the middle, but it was the president that was occupying her thoughts. On Friday, August 3rd, the day before she died, Marilyn called a longtime confidant, Anne Carger. Marilyn sounded melancholy and said that she was very much in love and was going to marry Bobby Kennedy. Mrs. Carger told Marilyn that she was delusional. Marilyn went on to call another acquaintance, Robert Slatzer, the same day. This was a call that would be remembered by many. Marilyn told Robert Slatzer that she was unable to contact Robert Kennedy in Washington. Marilyn said that she would receive information from the Kennedys' brother-in-law, actor Peter Lawford. Lawford later stated that Marilyn had in fact dialed his number that day. According to press reports and FBI papers, Kennedy traveled to California that day with his wife and 4 children. Kennedy's behavior was different that day. He arrived in California without his customary sparkling smile and shook hands stiffly with those he greeted, according to reporters. Marilyn tried to call Kennedy several times at the hotel where he was supposed to be staying and left several messages, but her phone calls were not returned. Marilyn was not just preoccupied with Robert Kennedy. She told Sidney Skolsky, a columnist who she had confided in exclusively about her friendship with John F. Kennedy. Marilyn told Sidney that she expected to be with him during a planned visit. Early Saturday, August 4th, Marilyn called her former neighbor and actress Jean Carmen, sounding very distressed. She said some woman had been bothering her and calling her names all night, Carmen recounted, and a voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. The voice said, "Leave Bobby alone, you tramp," the anonymous caller reportedly yelled. "Bobby should be left alone." Marilyn invited Carmen to come over and drink some wine and bring sleeping medications. Carmen excused herself, claiming that she had a hectic day. Marilyn had 2 phones, one pink with a number she gave to all callers, and one white with a number she only gave to close friends. Both had long extension cables, allowing Marilyn to move around her house while talking. Skolsky made one of his regular weekend calls that day from his house across the city. He had his daughter Steffi listen in on an extension this time. Frightened by her recent confidences about the Kennedys, Marilyn stated she anticipated seeing one of the Kennedys that evening, according to Steffi. Marilyn was visited late that morning by Agnes Flanagan, one of her hairdressers and close friend. A delivery man arrived with a parcel when she was at home. Marilyn opened the parcel to find a cuddly white tiger that she carried out to the pool. Marilyn sat by the pool holding the doll, appearing terribly sad, according to Flanagan. Photographs taken the next day at the back of Marilyn's house show 2 plush animals abandoned near the pool. Was it possible that one of them was the white tiger Marilyn was holding the previous day? Was there a dreadful note tucked away with the stuffed animal? Is it possible that the tiger was the message? A real-life plush tiger occupied pride of place in Robert Kennedy's office at the Justice Department in Washington, which may or may not be significant. Marilyn, in any case, appeared to be losing control. She called her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, at 4:30 p.m. on the final day. She seemed somewhat depressed and a bit drugged, he thought. He stopped by to visit her, then left at 7 p.m. for a dinner reservation. He would later inform members of the Los Angeles suicide prevention team in confidence why his patient had been upset that day after she died. Marilyn had received calls that morning, and by the time I saw her, she was in a rage, he informed the physicians. She'd had sexual encounters with very significant men in government at the top level in the recent past. She expressed some discontent with the idea that she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and she did not even have a date for Saturday night when he saw her that last day. Marilyn had been expecting to see one of the extremely important individuals that night, according to one suicide team doctor, Norman Tabajnik. She had contacted him after learning that the meeting had been canceled. Greenson said that she had died a few hours later, feeling rejected by some of the individuals she had been close to. A long-standing close friend, dressmaker Harry Rosenfeld, called Marilyn from New York between 8 and 9 p.m. that evening. He felt she sounded a touch groggy, but that was nothing out of the ordinary. At 9:30 p.m., the actress dialed the number of Sidney Gilaroff, a well-known hairstylist who had done her hair in 8 of her films and had become a close friend. He made it a point not to talk about his clients with the press, and he resisted any attempts to get him to talk about Marilyn's last call, even off the record. Gilaroff finally opened up in 1996 when he was writing his memoirs just before his death. Marilyn's relationship with the Kennedys was clearly foremost on her mind in the closing hours of her life, based on what Gilaroff had said. Gilaroff wrote, "Marilyn telephoned me in despair. She went on and on about being in dangerous situations, betrayal by men in high places, and secret love affairs. She told Gilaroff that Robert Kennedy had come to her house that day, threatening me, yelling at me. Robert, she alleged, had broken his commitment to marry her and was now informing her the relationship was finished." According to Gilaroff, Marilyn claimed that she retaliated against the president's brother by threatening him. She'd go public with a full-fledged news conference. She stated that despite the lovers' fight, she knew secrets about what had gone on in Washington. "What kind of secrets do you have?" She informed Gilaroff dangerous ones, and then hung up without saying goodbye. Another person claimed to have had a conversation with Marilyn that night. Marilyn was called between 9:30 and 10 p.m., according to Jose Bolanos, a Mexican scriptwriter who had been chasing her. He claimed she told him something that would stun the entire globe one day. But even years later, he would not say what it was. Marilyn stopped the call by simply placing the phone down. She didn't hang up while Bolanos was still on the line. Ralph Roberts, Marilyn's masseuse, would hear the next morning from his answering service that a woman with a slurred voice had called his number at 10 p.m. Other than Marilyn, he had only provided his number to 2 others, both of whom were business associates. Marilyn, he assumed, was the caller. There were no additional calls that were known to exist. Marilyn would die very soon at an hour that had been debated for a long time, but was most likely before midnight. She would never have the press conference she had threatened to hold. Putting aside the scandal surrounding her romances with the Kennedy brothers, what grave secrets might have been revealed? The premise itself appears far-fetched. Marilyn's assertion that she was privy to secrets, on the other hand, might have some truth to it. Investigators for the Los Angeles District Attorney, who were looking into the circumstances surrounding Marilyn Monroe's murder in the 1980s, were denied access to certain documents held by the FBI. To me, that is very suspicious on its own. Using the Freedom of Information Act, investigators were able to learn that the Bureau had a 105 file on Marilyn. The 105 classification was used as an excuse to investigate everyone who did anything slightly political, which meant leftist, notably under Director J. Edgar Hoover. Parts of Marilyn's 105 file were tagged SMC, which stood for Security Matter Communists. They were kept under Category B1, which deals with foreign affairs and national security. The censor's pen completely blacked out some documents except for the subject headers. They've lately been re-released with very minimal changes. A report dated July 13th, 1962, less than a month before Marilyn's death, might have raised some eyebrows. Marilyn had mentioned having lunched at the Peter Lawfords with President Kennedy just a few days prior, according to the FBI's informant, who was not named in the document. The document stated that Marilyns' views are very positively and concisely leftist. However, she is being actively used by the Communist Party. It is not common knowledge among those working with the movement in Los Angeles. In one crucial area, the report was incorrect. That July, President John F. Kennedy was not in California. However, it's plausible that Marilyn had lunch with Robert Kennedy in the timeframe stated, a few days before July 13th in the era specified. From the afternoon of June 26th through to morning of June 28th, the Attorney General was in LA. During that visit, he did see Marilyn. 2 weeks later, he would fly to Nevada with General Maxwell Taylor, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. His goal was to see an atomic test. The threat of nuclear war loomed large in 1962, as did the high level of tension between Fidel Castro's Cuba and the Soviet Union. Castro was expecting a U.S. invasion and was making urgent appeals to Moscow for support in late June and early July, according to the F.B.I. report. When one of the Kennedy brothers addressed nuclear things with Marilyn, Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet Union's premier, made the fatal decision to send ballistic missiles to Cuba in early July. The world was only a few months away from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the world came closer to nuclear war than any other time in history. The revealed FBI documents make no mention of either Kennedy brothers spilling state secrets to Marilyn. The point is that any private communication with the Attorney General or the President about nuclear weapons at any time would have been of great interest to Soviet intelligence. Sam Giancana, the bosses of the Chicago Mafia and head of organized crime network spanning vast swaths of the United States, stepped into an airport waiting area in July 1961, a year before Marilyn Monroe's death, to be greeted by a team of FBI agents. By this time, the pressure from the Kennedy Justice Department had been unbearable, and he had lost his cool. The agents reported the following. "You know who I mean the Kennedys," Giancana added, indicating that he was aware that the agents intended to submit the results of his interview to their boss, who would then report the results to their superboss and superboss. "I know everything there is to know about the Kennedys, and one of these days, we are all going to tell you everything," he continued. "Tonight, you started a fire that will never burn out. You'll come to regret the day." The FBI taped a conversation between Giancana and Johnny Roselli, a Mafia member who led the extortion rackets in Hollywood 6 months later. The mobsters had hoped that Frank Sinatra would serve as a sort of hotline to the Kennedys, but they were let down. Go the other way. Roselli instructed Giancana, F everyone, allow them to see your other side. The two mob bosses then traded notes on bugging devices. "What I want is something very small," Giancana says. Roselli, "All right, let's get this party started. Out there, I've got a guy. I got to figure out what the tiniest item is thanks to a person in LA who had an electronic cap and showed it to me. Do you have a receiver? What was the size of the receiver?" Giancana says, "The box was just around 3 inches by 3 inches in size." Roselli, "You're right. I'll get to work on that. Bobby is currently in Washington." Electronic surveillance was already being used to entrap the Kennedys by a fellow Kennedy enemy, a Giancana friend. Jimmy Hoffa, the dishonest Teamsters union head, had called a meeting with Fred Otash, a well-known Hollywood private eye. What they wanted was for me to start working on a comprehensive, in-depth and negative report file on John and Bobby Kennedy, Otash recalled. He agreed and sought technical assistance from a professional. Reed Wilson, an electrical whiz who has worked for politicians, Las Vegas casino operators, and government agencies for years, was the person they needed. The grand Santa Monica home of Peter and Pat Lawford, which both brothers visited when they traveled west, was an obvious primary target for obtaining intelligence on the Kennedys in California. During a social gathering when the house was full of guests, Wilson personally planted listening devices there, he alleged in an interview. There were 4 or 5 devices which were to be detonated whenever Otash received word that one of the Kennedy brothers was on his way to LA. John Danoff, a former security guard who worked for Otash, was instrumental in this operation. He claimed that the team was successful in wiring rooms and phones not only at the Lawford Beach House but also at the apartment Marilyn Monroe occupied until her death when she purchased her own home. Danoff, who was stationed in a car not far from the Lawford house, kept an eye on the recording equipment that was picking up transmissions from the bugs that had been installed there. He found the strongest signal around 500 yards from the home. Around Thanksgiving 1961, he recalled. At first, all he heard was idle chatter. To my surprise, I began to identify the voices. The president's unmistakable Bostonian accent and Marilyn Monroe's voice. Then you heard them talking, and they began to undress and perform a sex act on the bed. In November of that year, the president visited Los Angeles and met Monroe. Reed Wilson, for one, remembers reviewing a recording of the president having sex with Monroe with Otash. 25 or 30 recordings were transferred east over time, according to Otash, to electronic specialist Bernard Spindle, who had ties to both Hoffa and Giancana. The FBI had been receiving disturbing allegations about the president's sex life with women other than Monroe in Washington. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover informed Kennedy of the dangers he was taking during a lunch at the White House in early 1962. It appears that the lunch was cut short. Kenneth O'Donnell, a Kennedy advisor present at the time, recalls the president telling Hoover, "Get rid of that guy. He's the most uninteresting person I've ever met." Within days, the president would be with Monroe at Frank Sinatra's California house. There was no doubt in my mind that they were having a good time doing what comes naturally, said LA County Assessor Philip Watson, who saw them together there. Marilyn had gotten a surprise phone call from Art James, a real estate agent she had known for years. I should get Marilyn away from her house, James reflected. Maybe for a weekend to my cottage in Laguna Beach. They needed her home to be empty so they could set up bugging devices. I told them I wasn't going to do it. Marilyn was not warned. I figured she was already concerned about the stuff. They'd find a method to bug the residents if they wanted to. Monroe had recently moved into the mansion, which was undergoing substantial renovations. The constant influx of workers made the area particularly vulnerable. Fred Otash, the detective who orchestrated the bugging of the Lawford residents, was called upon once more to assist. In an interview, he claimed Bernard Spindle came out to the coast and hit the phones, and there was a room bug as well. It wasn't only the phones that were the problem. Monroe's new house had been bugged according to a number of sources. Chuck O'Brien, the foster son and valued assistant of Teamster leader Jimmy Hoffa, stated Spindle was working on Monroe's thing for the old guy and some political people. He was able to collect cassettes. The most information was remembered by Spindle associate named Paris Theodore. He stated the technology utilized included a tiny grain of rice microphone that could be hidden in a wall or woodwork. The tape contained a 40-minute recording of events at Marilyns' home on the day she died, which Spindle allowed him to hear. It reflected Robert Kennedy's 2 visits to the White House that day. At first, you could hear Marilyn and Kennedy chatting, Theodore recounted. It seemed echoey, as if the sound was coming from a room near the transmitter. In fact, Monroe's room was around the corner from a big vestibule off the front door. Monroe demanded an explanation as to why Kennedy was not going to marry her. After a violent confrontation, the voices became quieter as they debated. I'm not sure I would have known it was R.F.K. if I hadn't previously recognized his voice. He screamed with a high-pitched screech. Kennedy, according to Theodore, seemed to be on the lookout for something, perhaps one of the actress's notebooks, in which she had a long-standing habit of jotting notes, is to blame. "Do you know where it is? Where the F is it?" asked the president's brother, according to Theodore. Monroe did not respond, and the tape concluded with the sound of a slamming door. Kennedy allegedly left, then returned with Peter Lawford, according to the tape. Kennedy said that along the lines of, "We have to know. It's vital to the family's well-being. We can make whatever arrangements you want, but we have to look for it." Monroe, on the other hand, was yelling at them and yelling them out of the house. Thumping, bumping noise, then muffled, relaxing sounds came in the recording. It sounded like the actress was being laid on the bed. Theodore added, Kennedy and Lawford discussed Kennedy's possible departure from the city. It was agreed that once Kennedy had left the area, a call would be made to Monroe's number. The tape ended with the sound of a phone ringing and being picked up. The guy who did so, on the other hand, said nothing. Dr. Ralph Greenson, Marilyn's psychiatrist, would later say he discovered her face down on her bed with a phone clutched violently in her hand hours before she died. Following Marilyn's death, the actress's phone company was ordered to delete certain records of inbound and outbound phone calls. James Doyle, a former senior FBI agent, claimed, "We were on the scene quickly. The orders were to erase the data." According to Doyle, these orders came from either the Attorney General or the President himself. And to me, that is suspicion all on its own. If the compromising cassette recordings continued to pose a threat to the Kennedys, measures were taken to eliminate the threat. Investigators from the district attorney's office, armed with a search warrant, would descend on a wiretapper Spindle's house in New York State for years after Marilyn's death. Tapes and evidence about the events surrounding the cause of death of Marilyn Monroe would strongly suggest that the official reported circumstances of her death are wrong. Spindle's lawyers would claim in a subsequent case. Arnold Stream, one of the lawyers involved, stated he was confident that the tapes did exist and the copies were in the district attorney's possession. Despite the fact the claimed recordings were never found, a copy may have remained until 1968 when Robert F. Kennedy was campaigning for president. Ralph de Toledano, a conservative writer, recounted being approached by a senior corporate executive who was collecting information for a bipartisan group committed to derail Kennedy. Retired Army Colonel Dennis Harris, who was contracted to find the cassettes, said the duplicates had survived and could be purchased for the appropriate price. The cassettes were to be transcribed and mailed to the editors of every newspaper in the country. De Toledano explained, "When Robert F. Kennedy was killed in June of that year, negotiations were well underway." 2 decades later, the topic was revisited for a planned documentary on ABC's television 2020. The fact that the Kennedy brothers had affairs with Marilyn Monroe would not surprise Americans, according to Emmy Award-winning producer Stanhope Gold. One heck of a tale was that the President and Attorney General of the United States had put themselves in a position to have the country's most powerful criminals spy on their affairs with the country's most renowned actress and were subjected to blackmail. The ABC team worked on the story for months, crisscrossing the country and spending $250,000 before establishing the events described here occurred. Then, in the days leading up to the broadcast, top ABC executives interfered. The program was canceled at the last minute at around 6 p.m. on the evening of the scheduled broadcast. The cancellation was covered in every newspaper. Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, two of the most well-known faces of ABC's 2020, spoke out openly in support of the journalists involved. "A dead president belongs to history, and he belongs to accurate history," Downs was reported as adding. The material was highly sourced. 2020 executive producer Av Weston stated, "It had excellent journalism and should have been broadcast." It should be noted that Roone Arledge, the president of ABC News, decided to cancel the show. Ethel Kennedy's widow, Robert Kennedy's widow, was a long-standing acquaintance of Arledge's. David Burke, his aide, was a former Kennedy strategist. Another Arledge assistant, Jeff Rue, had married one of Robert Kennedy's children. Arledge denied that the Kennedy link played a role in his decision to cancel the show. "I wouldn't limit anything because it would offend a friend," he explained, "since I've already insulted half of my friends." I find that hard to believe. Clearly it's a cover-up. The most generous answer came from Gold.
So over the years, I have grown to kind of question authority and almost distrust the media, especially in the last 2 years with COVID. And I don't know why, but my gut is telling me something's not right when it comes to Marilyn Monroe's death. I feel like it's just suspicious to me. I feel like there's always two sides to every story. Hopefully one day the truth will come out, and maybe this documentary coming out on Netflix too will help get people more interested in this subject, and maybe people will start questioning things because it just, something isn't right. And to me, it's tragic to think that the death of Marilyn Monroe, one of the most famous faces of the 20th century, is still basically unknown. I know the coroner wrote what he wanted, but I feel like it is just unsolved to me, and hopefully there is more to come. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think she took her own life? Do you suspect suspicion? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the big red button below, and thank you all my new members who joined. All right, I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.